Welcome to the Tank Podcast. In this week's episode, artist Eva Jospin discusses her collaboration with the champagne house Ruinart as part of their Carte Blanche program, a series of artworks and immersive environments made entirely out of cardboard.
Well, I started to use cardboard as a main material for the pieces more or less 15 years ago, because actually cardboard is always very present in the studios. I started with 1 year in architecture before quitting and going to fine art school, and we already use cardboard to do some models, or and usually it's a material you can use because it's very easy everywhere, it's cheap, you can find it in the streets. And you use it to just give a shape to your ID, but usually then the final ID will be in another material. So it's a transition. And I started using this material as the final point, really and I started to use it in a very absurd way because it's a poor material, but I took a lot of time to transform it, to cut it, to glue it, to sand it, as it was the most precious thing in the world, and that was really like the idea to replace the time in order to create this illusion. And I started with forest as my main subject, and there was really this idea of circling, that cardboard comes from the tree and that will go back to the representation of forest, but of course it's hopeless because it's not a real one. Those trees are not going to grow again. And I thought also that it was a very interesting material because I work with layers, and I really add layer on layer, and the cardboard itself is made of layers. And as a sculpture, it's a very, very, very interesting material because sculpture is all about light and shadow. This is the way the perception of sculpting is always related to light and shadow. And the cardboard, when you start cutting it, when you start sanding it, is contain its own shadow because it's surrogated, And so you have the shadow everything and there everywhere. And you have a sense of vibration when you use it that is kind of special, I guess. And it's also a material that you can use in a way that will relate to nature and vegetation, but as well to geology and stone, because the stratification of it is also a very great artifice to go towards the geology. So it's a very interesting material to work with. Before starting this collaboration with Ruinart, I was already a very great fan of this champagne, and also because Ruinart is very present in the art world, thanks to the Carte Blanche actually. So I knew the project and the champagne that I really appreciate. And also I knew a lot of things they've been doing around the artist, and I thought this commitment was very interesting. So that was like my first approach with Ruinart. The first time I visited the vineyard of Ruinart, I didn't know what would be the project. I knew they had a project in mind, but they're also doing a lot of projects with artists in the vineyard and in the house of Champagne. So I didn't know it was for the Carte Blanche. I didn't have any thoughts before because I was not aware of what would be the project. And when I understood they had this idea of me for the Carte Blanche, then I started to think of what could be the project. And so it was really helping to go back a second time, to visit the vineyards, to visit the Crayères, to visit all the places and to assist to all the transformation and all the steps from the vineyard and the very simple project which is grape, and then the final project which is this lovely champagne that I really, really enjoy. So that was my first approach, and the whole idea of the Carte Blanche was really to show the fact that from something very simple you can add some metamorphosis to it, as I do with the cardboard, which is also a very, very simple material, a poor material. And it's really like the attention you give to things, the time you give to things that will create this metamorphosis of it and bring it to another world and another imaginary, what I do, and also champagne, what it represents, you know. So that was my line to the Carte Blanche. The challenge we had is that it was so obvious that we have so many things in common that in a way it was kind of hard to come with an idea, a concept. And actually I didn't try to have a concept because this is not the way I work, but I was trying to create a journey between the works and between a landscape that is the Champagne, because Ruinart is the oldest maison of Champagne, but it's a territory that lives, breathe and work for Champagne everywhere, every day. The tourism is also connected to it. And there's also in Reims a very, very strong relation to past, because the Cathedral of Reims was where we had our king coronated, I mean, most of them. And so there's also for a little girl, every little girl in France or little boy in France knows about Reims because you see it in your history book, you know. So there is all these layers that I wanted to have in mind while creating this promenade and this journey in this landscape and in this territory. In the birth of myth, you have some places that can be a birth of a new myth or an explanation for the world. And so you have also the sea, the grottos, the caves, but you also have the forest. So it's like an archetype and also an archaic architecture, because you can compare forest to columns. And if you go to columns, then you go to architectural orders. And it's very fascinating to see how the architectural orders has been started more like 3,000 years ago, and they're like always present today, even though they're not in the center of architecture anymore, but they're still very present in our imagination. And I thought it was really interesting to relate nature and architecture, also because my idea is really like that you wander. So you start from the forest and then you wander, and then you arrive maybe in a garden. And in this garden you have follies, you have this architecture that was made only for your eyes and not with no utility, with no purpose, just like create something symbolic in a park. And that was something that started already with the Romans that were doing this nymphaeos, but then was back in the Renaissance garden, and then very, very strong in the 18th century in England. England is a great makers of fabrics and folly in gardens, but also in France with Hubert Robert, and then in the 19th century again, like in Paris, we have this incredible garden that I love, which is Butte Chaumont. So you can see that there is like this continuity with the relation between nature and architecture, and that fabric is really like the place to mix the both and to have a response of nature on something we build. And I think I'm trying to create a fiction that would be a very nice balance between the both of it, which is of course not the situation that we have, but it's a very nice dream. So that's what I do. The fiction for me is very important because I never tell a story. The story is not precise, but in a way you can have the feeling that those works you see, those pieces you see, could be a stage design or could be a place for a story. But then the story is not there because it's a mix of a lot of influences, but I never want to have a storytelling because the story is already forgotten. It's really like that have roots in the past, like way, way before. And I'm very interested in general with the fact that in Europe, the main sense was and is also in a way still the eyes, and the invention of perspective had a huge influence on the way we started building the world and building our fictions, because it changed the way we build the gardens, creating fake perspective in gardens, but also creating effect of perspective in architecture. Like, I don't know, for example, Palazzo Farnese in Rome, they have these fake doors with, like, they're thinner on the top, and it's like a total illusion. And then, of course, stage design for theater of opera. And if you think of that, then you go directly to cinema. So I see a narrative, I see a link between all this way to exaggerate the sensation you have with your vision. And that's what I think that the relation to artificiality is very important, because sometimes it helps us to relate better to reality, and we always create artificiality to explain the world or to relate to the world. I don't know why we do that, but it's absolutely constant in the human history. For this Carte Blanche, it was also my first occasion to work with the digital. I used this medium in a very funny way, because we started from the reality to go to the fake. So, for example, there is two videos. One is in a forest, and you go, you will pass in front of the forest, and it's very frontal. And all the perception, actually, the materiality of it is from real work. And then we really paste on the structure. So it's all the images that you have come actually from reality. So it's a distortion of real work, real cardboard forest I make. And then you have another one who's drawing, and you can, it's like scrolling in front of you. It's a vision like in a train, you know. And there is like little animation. We change like a fontaine or something like that. But it's still from a real drawing that I made that is in the carte Montel called Carte Blanche. So it was very interesting for me to work with this digital part, but in a way coming from the real world, and not trying to use the materiality that 3D renders can give you, because you have to invent everything from scratch. And actually, we invented everything from something real. And I thought this thing was more subtle and more ambiguous. Yeah, I think the environmental concern is impacting my work from the beginning, because it's absolutely not innocent to start working with cardboard and doing forest. And I think we artists are always like moved by we are in the contemporary world. And we express what we feel in the contemporary world. But I think the main concern we need to have now, and that's really what I believe, is that we have to understand how to make the world in the future. And we have to take this responsibility of what do we use, what kind of material we use to make the world. But this cannot be the subject of all piece of art, of course not. So I had a very strong relation to this topic of forest, to this material, to this relation between nature and culture, between nature and architecture, between the spaces of the garden. And because this is very personal, and this is really my passion, but it's not a message, an ecological message. I think if there is one ecological message I would love to share with everybody and with all artists, is that we should try to be more responsible in the way we make things in general, but not only artists. And it's a very long thing and very big subject, but I think making differently is important, but the subject of the art must be totally free and open at 360 degrees, like a forest. I have a dream, because I think I need to have dreams, big dreams, bigger than me to go on. And my dream is to make my own garden, of course, and to do my own artist garden with all the sculpture and the folies and the fabrics inside, and to see how the relation between nature and the hands of man and the hands of nature can integrate, and so this is the dream I have, and I hope I will start soon, and I wish I can do this garden for the rest of my life. So it's also a very long project I have in mind.
To hear more podcasts from Tank, you can subscribe on all major podcast platforms or follow us on SoundCloud. The theme music for this podcast is by Himera.